Hi there. So let's talk about the MC303 here, the Roland original groove box that was released in 1996. I think many people have this machine, and it's probably one of the most controversial machines ever made. Roland must have sold millions of these back in the 90s and later, but I don't want to make this video too long. I know where a lot of the criticism for the MC303 comes from, I think, at least. I think a lot of it has to do with its name. It is a bit of a misleading device when you think about the TB303, which was already immensely popular back when this came out. And it kind of you get the expectation, or you have the expectation to emulate the TB303 sound in the MC303, which does not really work. I mean, the baseline TB303 is an analog device that is very quirky, very characteristic. I think it's the definition of sound character. It's the perfect example for this. People pay incredible amounts of money for the old original TB303s. And so, of course, by naming this device MC303, and then many people know, of course, that it has waveforms from the original TB303 in it, you get the expectation that you can do the same thing with the TB3 as with the TB303, just for a much lower price, and this simply isn't true. It's not the same. It can kind of get close in this to this sound, but it doesn't really do the same as the TB303. Then there was the MC505 a couple of years later that does so many things more and a lot better than the MC303. To say it right away, I think if you have an MC505, there's not really a reason to also buy the MC303 unless you are really looking for the more lo-fi sound that the MC303 has. They don't sound the same. They are quite different. The drums, to me personally, appear to be a bit more punchy coming from the MC303. But then again, you're missing many editing functions that the MC505 has over the MC303. You don't get two individual output pairs in the MC303 that the 505 has. You don't get a four-tone structure. These are either one or two tone patches in the MC303 that cannot really be edited in such a detailed way as in the MC505. But I still like its sound a lot. The sequencer in the MC303 is a lot more limited compared to the MC505. You don't have 64 voices, you only have 28 voices in the MC303. So there are, if you're undecided between the two, MC505 and MC303, I'd always recommend the MC505. But then again, the MC505 doesn't offer everything that the MC303 has, and if you're happy with a smaller form factor and a more limited concept, which always has the advantage of offering a little bit of a faster workflow, because you don't even have to think about so many options because you simply don't get them in the MC303, then you might even prefer the MC303 over the 505. But yeah, there's also a lot of weirdness going on in this machine, which is also something I want to talk about a little bit. When we switch the machine on, you have so many preset patterns here. All these banks up until L. L is the first bank in the MC303 that can actually be overwritten, which not so many people know, but you can always only overwrite all of these patterns from L to Q, I think is the last bank, with your own user patterns when they have mute information stored into them. So you can create variations of a user pattern with different mute settings that can then be configured into a whole song. But when you delete your user patterns that are the basis for these variation patterns, then all of these patterns will also be gone, which is important to know. Another comparison to the MC505, I would call the MC505 a true digital synthesizer, where you can swap out waveforms and make all kinds of different settings. 2 LFOs in the MC505 only, and these are multimode filters in the MC505. The 303 has this is not a low pass filter, by the way, in the MC303. You can see that when you have sounds that are in a very high range, the filter doesn't really catch the sound. It only affects the mid-range frequencies. And also you have this kind of weird zero setting in the middle position here. When these rotary knobs are set to 12 o'clock, you have they are divided into negative and positive amounts when you have a closer look. So that is also a bit weird, and you don't see this in too many other devices. But I think the sequencer in the MC303 is still very, very powerful. You can have up to 32 bars in a pattern. When you compare this to the much more modern concept of the MC707, you get other benefits from this more modern concept, but you can do things in the MC303 that the MC707 is not capable of. You cannot really combine triplets into a straight 4/4 groove that easily in the MC707. You have to move notes around to get to the same results, which is really not comfortable to use. The MC303 has at least for me, the better sequencer concept of the two. So I think I want to focus on the stuff that I think throws people off using the MC303, things that they didn't get along with, and then maybe make more dedicated videos on all these special functions. I just want to mention a few things and maybe let you listen to some of the patterns that I've created. I even read somewhere someone was saying that it's impossible to make drum and bass with the MC303, and I want to show that this isn't true. I mean, maybe we have a different idea of what drum and bass patterns should sound like, and so this might still be disappointing to some, but I think it's something that I really like making with this machine, is these drum and bass type patterns. And also you can hear that there's this wobble bass in this example here. But maybe if we just focus on the rhythm, I really, really like these drum sounds for drum and bass. And then of course you can apply the filter to the sounds, and you can already hear what I just said before, that not all of these sounds are really affected by the filter. So the more extreme low and high frequencies are simply not affected. So this is a bandpass filter that only affects the mid-range of the sound. The MC303 is not a real synthesizer. I would definitely call this a rompler, whereas the MC505 is a true digital synthesizer in my view. Maybe not one of the best VA capable synthesizers. You can already emulate all these vintage originals very nicely in the MC505, despite having so many of these waveforms that are derived from these originals in both of these boxes actually. So don't expect VA synth quality from either the MC505 or the MC303. I think the MC707, that's where its biggest strength is. You can really emulate some of these sounds quite nicely in the MC707. But comparing all of these MC groove boxes, I would argue that the MC303 really has the strongest sound character of them all. I made a whole series of videos on the MC505 talking about its user interface and how to use the design, the way that things are printed on the panel on the 505 to understand its concept with the menu pages and everything. You can see that the function button is labeled in a certain way with this black box and gray letters inside, which tells you that there is a secondary function for all of these rotary encoders here, which can be reached when the function button is activated. Your main parameter, for example, in the arpeggio section here, is the accent rate, but then when you have function activated so that it's blinking, you know that this no longer controls the accent rate, but the octave range. Same for the cutoff and also level knob when you have function activated. I think this caused a lot of frustration when you're not aware that you have the function button activated and then turn the knob, and you think that you want to control when you want to control the cutoff parameter, and instead you're changing the level of the sound that you have currently selected here. Of course, when this happens over and over again, this can be really frustrating. So you have to be aware of what you're really doing all of the time. When the function button is on, you have to know about it. Then there is other weirdness, as I already said. For example, there is in the effects section, there is a second page in the menus. When you access the effects menu by holding down Shift and then pressing pad key number 5. This lets you select the type of reverb or delay that you want to use. And I've never seen anyone talk about this. There's a second page. There are sub-pages in this menu that can be reached pressing these arrow buttons here that are labeled with select, left and right, and this lets you step through all these pages. There's a second page labeled RCA, which stands for reverb character, and it does exactly the same as the page before, where you can read these abbreviations for all the different types of reverb. For example, RO1, this is a room reverb 1, room reverb 2, 3, then there's a hall, which is just a bigger room, hall 2, plate reverb, then comes the delay setting. So normal type of delay, and then a pan delay, which is a delay effect combined with modulation for the stereo image between left and right. And then on the second page, reverb character, it doesn't really make sense because reverb is not only reverb, it's also a delay in here. So that is a bit misleading to label it like this. But well, then again, you only have these like 3 segments here to give information or to inform you of the type of parameter you're changing here. This goes from 0 to 7, so there's 8 different assignments you can make here, and in the page before you see that there are also 8 different possible types of reverb and delay. And when you make a change here, this automatically changes the other page as well. Now this is set to 7, and since this starts with 0, this is the 8th type of effect that you can select here. When I change this to something else, the second page is also changed. It was 7 before, now it's 2. So it does not make any sense. Also, in the MC303 you get the possibility to use a send level, and the signal coming from the reverb can be sent to the flanger and chorus unit and vice versa. So when you are not careful, you can create this feedback loop that then causes the whole thing to crush. I think that's the right term, crushing effects. So you lose all your sound, and then it becomes really problematic when accidentally you have stored a setting like this where a feedback is always created, and these two kind of signals cancel each other out. So then you might really get the idea that your unit is broken, and you sell it on the used market for I don't know, $5 or something, or £5 or wherever you are from, and you still have a fully functioning unit. You just need to correct the setting that you have dialed in. Yeah, okay. As I said, I want to go more into detail, especially talking about how to use the effects section, how to use the LFO, what to expect from the arpeggiator, and most of all, how to use the sequencer in more detailed videos on each of these topics. I don't want to make this video too long. This is just a gear talk video here, and I want to leave it at that. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you're interested, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.